When it comes to the fantastic world of European cars that are fun to drive, there's a whole host of options from BMW, Volkswagen, Porsche, and also Mercedes. Today we're going to be talking about every awesome manual transmission Mercedes that you should have on your radar in your search for a fun European car. Danny Kruger here with FCP Euro, and today we're going to be talking about all of the Mercedes that you could have in the United States with a manual transmission. Mercedes isn't really known for their cars equipped from the factory with a row your own, but because of that, it's allowed the values of these cars to stay really, really low just because nobody really knows about them. So without further ado, we're going to hop into the first car on our list of Mercedes that you should be keeping an eye on if you're looking for a fun car, the R172 SLK. So taking it from the top with the last Mercedes sold in the United States with a manual transmission is the R172 SLK. The manual could only actually be had with the SLK 250, so that's going to be the R172 before it switched to the SLC. After a little bit of a facelift, they're kind of all the same underneath. But you can only get the manual with the 4-cylinder turbo, and they were really good cars. They handled great, they looked great. You could have a ton of really cool options packages, and a lot of them were spec'd in a really neat fashion that if you're buying secondhand, you can get a really cool car. So the SLK 250 and the R172 chassis, it came with that 6-speed manual mated to the back of the M271 Evo, which was kind of a little bit more high-tech for Mercedes. It had direct injection, it was turbocharged. It was actually a really efficient little engine, and because of that, these cars were great for daily driving, but they were also a ton of fun on a good back road. You can lower the top down. The specs that you could get them in were incredible. There was a ton of options packages, and a lot of people who did buy them new chose to spec them in a manner that's very enticing. You'll find some very cool options packages on these if you're shopping in the used market these days. If you're looking for the same type of thing with a drop top and a little bit of performance behind it, but maybe something a little bit easier to drive around town, the R171 might be the one for you. So the R171 SLK actually had the exact same 6-speed manual in it that was in the R172. It's the 716.6 6-speed that Mercedes designed for really everything. They used it in almost all of their manual produced cars, and it's pretty robust and reliable, which is a great thumbs up, and it's part of what makes these cars so easy to drive every day. One of the best ones for that, in my humble opinion, is the R171 chassis SLK. These cars came with the M272 V6, it's dual overhead cam, it's peppy, it's super reliable, with the exception of a couple things to look out for. If you head over to our blog, you'll see our write-up on how to look out for the big balance shaft issue, which is one you'll want to keep an eye on. But these cars from the factory had pretty much the same suspension as a W204 in the rear and a W203 in the front. They handled phenomenal, they had a ton of power, and that 6-speed felt really good in them. They're dirt cheap still, and you can kind of get a great car for not a lot of money. Or alternatively, if you're looking for a little bit more of a project, you might want to go one generation earlier with the R170. There were two engines in that one. There was the M112 V6 and the SLK 320. Or was the M111 supercharged, which was in the SLK 230. There's a little bit of a year split on the 230. I personally think you might want to look for the post-facelift ones, as that way you get a 6-speed rather than a 5-speed. You also get a rear sway bar. There's a couple little nuances that makes the late model 230 kind of the one to look for in my opinion. But that M111 in those 230s, it's great. It's got forged internals from the factory. You can do a little bit of tinkering, make it a really, really fun car to drive, and you can get pretty good power out of them. All while having a drop top just like in the 171 or even the 172. Any of the SLK family are going to be an absolute blast to drive with the top down, and you get to select your own gears as an added benefit. So, now that we've gotten some of the drop tops out of the way, let's talk sports sedans.
Now you're talking.
When it comes to Mercedes with a manual transmission, the C-Class is going to be your friend. Just like this W204 right behind me, they make a great platform whether you're looking for a daily driver that's just fun, or you're looking for a little bit of a project that you want to kind of spice up and make a really fun car. So the 204 right here, it's going to be a lot like that R171 SLK. So the same M272 V6, although these ones only got the 3-liter, whereas the SLK, you can get a whole bunch of different engine sizes. It's not the most powerful thing in these guys, but the sound is phenomenal. It's pretty robust, and that very same 716.6 6-speed in these cars is fantastic. It's great for getting around town or even for a little bit more performance driving. Another huge benefit of these right here, the C300, is that it has all the part interchangeability with the C63 AMG. So if you want the giant brakes, you want some great suspension, a limited slip, you can kind of just bolt all that stuff in there once you get a little bit familiar with some of the part numbers. These are a really, really good bet if you're looking for a comfy car with a nice interior that you can pick up for pretty cheap and do whatever you want to, whether that's just daily driving or maybe making something a little bit fancier out of it like we did with our AER car right here. So 204, pretty robust for the most part, but there are going to be a couple things you want to look out for. That same balance shaft thing that we're talking about on the R171, that's going to be kind of a trend in this discussion. Any M272 or M273 engine, although none of those were sold manual transmission, but any of those 272s, you're going to want to look out for the balance shaft issue. If you head to our blog page, that'll be linked in the description below, we'll have kind of a more in-depth analysis on what you need to be looking out for on all of these cars, but you're going to want to make sure it's got the good balance shaft. You're going to want to look out for things with the camshaft adjusters and a little bit of oil leak here and there, but overall, these cars, really solid. The interior can degrade a bit over time, so make sure you're looking for one that's been taken care of. Maintenance records, never a bad thing, but these are usually going to be ones that keep you getting where you need to go for a long time. So, if you think the W204 might be a little bit chunky looking or a little bit too big for you, the W203 is going to be your friend. There's a ton of different engines for these cars that were sold with that very same 716.6. You can kind of just pick and choose as you want to option the car. One of my personal favorites is going to be one with the M272 in it, so that'll be 2006 or 2007. The C230 is pretty common, and that's got the 2.5 liter, or the C350 like you're seeing right behind me, and you might have seen in our walk-around video. Very much an underappreciated car, but all of these W203s are going to be phenomenal to drive. That M272 V6 is perfect in this chassis. But if you're looking for something a little bit different than these M272 cars, or maybe even something a little bit more budget friendly, you can move back a few years before that 06 date.
We have to go back!
That's when you're going to have a lot of really interesting engines that Mercedes did choose to put in the very same chassis. The options packages are going to make them look a little different. The sport packages are a little bit less aggressive in the earlier years, but you could have them with the M271, which is a 1.8 liter supercharged. You could have them with the M111, which is a 2.3 liter supercharged 4-cylinder. You could even have them with the M112 engine family, which were super robust, super reliable V6s. The choice is sort of yours as you want to option them, and if you even are looking outside of the sports sedan segment, you could get a couple of those engines in a coupe. Kind of looks a lot like those BMW 318 Ti's that you'd see kind of roaming around, but a little bit more modernized. And those you could have with the M271 with that 1.8 liter. You could have them with the M111 supercharged as well. Or if you're looking for a really rare little nugget that's kind of hard to find, you could get one with the 3.2 liter M112 in a C320 coupe. Some of these, as the option packages get more specific, are really tricky to find, which is a great way to get into a super rare car if you're looking for kind of a niche car that nobody else on the road's even going to know about. Those C320 coupes, super rare. This C350 manual right here, also super rare. And one of my personal favorites, if you can even find one for sale, is going to be either a C240 or a C320 wagon with a manual transmission. Forum stories back in the day used to say there were around 10 of them in the United States, and that's a good part of 2 decades ago now, so who knows how many are actually floating around, but if you do find one of those, that's definitely a good one to scoop up. You're probably not going to find one available again. When it comes to the 203, in terms of things to look out for, they're generally very reliable cars. It's going to differ depending on the engine that you're looking at, as well as the year of the vehicle. Some of the early ones had some issues with rust around the rear quarter panel, and then when you get down to the engine-by-engine basis, definitely keep an eye on that balance shaft for 06 cars specifically, as well as 07 cars sometimes. You can check that pretty easily. The M271 had some timing chain things. You're going to want to be careful to buy one that has been maintained. Maintenance records on the timing system, as well as maybe even the oil pump, are going to be ones you'll want to keep an eye on. The M111, that 2.3 liter supercharged 4-cylinder, super robust for the most part. Forged internals, they're just getting a little bit older, so you're going to want to be careful. Again, make sure it's not too weepy, too leaky. Sounds healthy. And the M112 V6s, they're usually pretty bulletproof, but you're going to want to try and find one that doesn't have a ton of oil leaks if you can help it. They can get pretty bad.
So maybe you're looking a little bit older, more towards a classic than a C-Class, or maybe you just consider yourself an old soul and you're looking for kind of a classy looking little older daily.
Yeah, things were just better in those days.
The W201 is going to be a great pick for you. The 190E and the 190D models, they sold a ton of different awesome engines hooked up to a 5-speed manual that you could get. There's a whole bunch of them that were sold in the United States. You can get them overseas, of course, as well. But here in the US, we got a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 5-cylinder diesel. Super cool, not very likely to win any races though. It's a little bit gutless. Awesome daily driver. You could get the 2.3 liter M102 4-cylinder. You could also get that in a 16-valve Cosworth tuned variant in the 190E Kazi. Just like our Golden Era build that you might have seen on YouTube is kind of set up to look exactly like. And then there's also the 190E 2.6, which had the M103 inline 6. All of these powertrains pair very well with that chassis. It handles great, kind of floats down the road. They're all super robust too. So even though they're a little bit older now, being a mid to late 80s into the 90s production vehicle, they kind of hold up really well, and you can still drive them the way that you would drive kind of a modern vehicle. Fuel injection system's a little bit iffy, so you want to be careful with CIS and things like that the car has been taken care of. And you're going to want to watch for rust just like on any other older vehicle. But otherwise, you can kind of just drive them like a normal car.
So if a classic sounds good to you, and maybe one of those SLKs sounded awesome as well, but you're looking a little bit maybe classier or more stylish.
Classic?
There is an R129 that was sold in the US with a manual transmission. In my opinion, that's one of the prettiest SLs ever made. And you could get it with one of my favorite engines as well. This is going to be the 300 SL. And there was only a couple hundred of them sold in the United States, but you could get them with the M104 dual overhead cam inline 6 and also with a dog-like 5-speed behind them. I think the official production number was somewhere around 340 on those back in the day. They're going to be end of the 80s into the 90s, so pretty hard to find them, but they will pop up every once in a while. And if you can grab one of those, they're a phenomenal car. That M104 inline 6 is super smooth and is really honestly acquainted pretty well to like a BMW S50 or an S52. You put that on the front of a really solid 5-speed manual transmission in a great convertible with really good weight distribution, and you have a perfect car for stacking up miles with the roof down. They're also super reliable, really easy to take care of for the most part. It's part of what makes them so desirable, and it's also why if you do find one of these popping up, you better act quickly because they're going to get scooped up. So, wrapping up our list today is going to be another one of my favorite Mercedes ever made, the W124 E-Class. The 300E and even the 260E specifically, you could have with an M103 inline 6, varying displacement of course, based on the nomenclature, as well as a 5-speed manual. The W124 E-Class still today is thought of as one of the better ones you could have across Mercedes' entire lineage. They're super comfortable, super robust, they're really nice looking cars, and you can still get them really cheap. They're a phenomenal classic, mainly by stipulation. The styling is held up really well to the point where you kind of wouldn't know how old these cars were unless you're really familiar with them. And yet they can still be driven every day. They get great fuel economy, they're super robust. It's a lot of that older Mercedes engineering that we've kind of talked about on some of these previous models where the engines just hold up really well, and as long as you take care of them, they're going to take care of you. So that is going to conclude our list of all the modern Mercedes with a manual transmission that you want to keep on your radar. There are a few that we omitted today, such as the C107, the R107, some of the classics. You could have those with a manual even in the US. They're pretty rare. They're going to cost you some real money. So if you're feeling a little bit more spendy, those may be the ones you want to also look into a little bit. But for the sake of kind of just having a little bit of a project or a fun daily driver, the ones on today's list are the ones you're going to want to keep an eye on. Of course, if you want to learn more about the cars that we talked about today, you can head down in the description. My whole blog right up on our site will be down there, and it's going to have all the nitty-gritty details on every model that we talked about today, including what to look for and what to look out for. And also, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe as we have a ton more European-specific knowledge coming your way very soon.